All right, we're gonna start our next meeting. It is way past the hour of 10 on Friday, August 13th, 2021. Will you please do roll call?
Davis. Iqbal.
Iqbal present.
Kopi. Lewis.
Kopi's present.
Thank
Sorry.
you, Mr. Kopi. Molina. Wallace. Mr. Ford,
Present.
you do not have a quorum at the moment.
Okay. Yeah.
That's not a bad thing.
Try marking Kopi again.
I have Kopi. I have Ford, Iqbal, and Kopi currently.
And
Ms.
Molina,
Molina?
she's still online.
Davis? And Mr. Wallace is in the hallway.
Yes. All right. We're still just gonna go ahead and get started and try them again on let's see whether they're in communication or not. I don't think there's any public comments. So we'll go on with the with workforce development and any presentation.
Good morning, Chairman Ford. This is Scott Berger. I have my colleague Maria Gonzalez on the line as well. We do have our financial report for you. These financial reports are effective the end of June, which is the end of our program year. And before I hand it over to Maria, I just want to acknowledge that our staff worked very hard to meet our expenditure and obligation benchmarks. And I'm happy to report to you that our workforce development program is in compliance with the various expenditure and obligation requirements that are brought down to us from the federal level. Is Maria on the phone?
I am. Thank you, Scott.
I'll hand it off to you now. Thank you.
Thank you again. As Scott did mention, we did achieve all of our required benchmarks for the first year of the 2-year grant cycle for the WIOA 20 grant. For the WIOA 19, we had until June 30th to fully spend down that grant, and we did achieve that as well. It was through a lot of hard work and dedication and a great team effort that had that not been in place, we would not have been able to get to this point. If you look at page 7 of your packet, you will see the how exactly we did achieve. I'm sorry. If you turn to page 7 of your packet, you will see on the bottom half the financial benchmarks for the WIOA 20, where if you recall, the obligation requirement is at 80%. We attained that with adult being at 93% obligated, dislocated worker at 86%, and then the youth with 94%. That doesn't necessarily mean, that just means that we are committed to pay down the funds. We're saying that we are going to spend that down through the remainder of this new year. Our direct training requirement has been at 50% all along, and the team has worked really hard so that we maintained above that. So we ended the program year at 55% of the direct training benchmark. Now, the youth percentages that you see below that, the youth out of school and the work-based learning, we are not held accountable for those until the end of the grant cycle. So we have to make sure that 75% of the youth funds are for youth out, and that the work-based learning percentage is at 20%. So we will be held accountable for that at the end of June 2022. If you go to page 11 in your packet, that talks about the trade grant. The grant period for that runs through September 30th. So we have until then to fully spend down those funds. The program administrators and team and I have already started looking and forecasting to see how things are going to end up and to ensure that we spend it down as best as we can. The last page is for the WIOA statewide rapid response. You will see that we fully spent that down by reimbursing the various companies that went through the application process to get some COVID funding. That all occurred at the end of June, and we were in compliance and spent those funds down. The following report is the AP report that Kane County Finance provides so that you can see all of the payouts that occurred in the month of June. Any questions?
I think there's a question by Molina, I believe. You there?
Hi, no questions, sorry. Just had
Oh,
some
okay.
technical difficulties. I'm here.
Okay, all right.
Ron, Mark Davis here.
Go ahead, Mark.
I am here just with the lateness of the other one, juggling too many things right now, and I'm going to stay in as long as I can, but sorry, go ahead.
Chairman Ford, this is Scott Berger. I just want to mention that Marie and I are available later in the morning on the normal meeting date. And we've noticed that the Energy and Environmental Committee has routinely gone beyond their 1 hour duration. So if you would like to consider rescheduling the Jobs Committee for a later time, we would be very amenable to that.
Yes, and I'll give you a call and talk with Mark Davis on looking into that.
Thank you.
Ms. Molina and Mr. Davis, you and Mr. Wallace are all in the room and have been accounted for in attendance. Thank you.
So with that, any more, Mr. Burt, Scott?
No, that concludes our report for you this morning. Thank you.
All right. I said we'll go back to approval of the minutes from June 11th and June 16th of 2021. I mean, July, I'm sorry. June 11th and July 16th. Clerk, please call the roll. Oh, can I get a motion?
Molina
Davis
moves.
moves. Or I'll second.
All right, moved by Molina, second by Davis.
Iqbal,
Yes.
Kopi, Lewis,
Opie, yes.
thank you. Lewis, Molina,
Molina, yes.
Wallace,
Yes.
Davis,
Davis, yes.
Ford. That
Yes.
passes. Thank you.
All right, moving on, comments by the chair. Davis, do you have anything you want to say?
No, I'm not prepared with any comments right now, other than Scott may have a good point about looking for a different time slot. So we'll take that conversation up later.
All right, we'll do a three-way conversation on the phone. The only comment I have is we had been kind of looking forward to doing a roundtable discussion sometime in the near future before the month's over with. I'm gonna revisit that. I think that's one of the strong points of this committee is making those communications with the out there with the public, with the working world on different aspects of job opportunities. So we'll just take a look at that somewhere down the road. I still would like to get that accomplished. So anybody got any other suggestion with that, just please let me know. All right, we're gonna move on to, when I say let me know, give me a phone call. We're gonna move on to a Jobs Committee list with the presentation, current jobs seekers.
Thank you. We'll just wait a moment while Blair gets that forward. And I just want to say thank you for everyone for sticking with us. I'm going to move through my slides a little bit quicker than normal. These are all posted on the agenda website. So if there's any further clarification or you have any follow-up questions, I'd love to assist. But last month, I brought forth that I was going to be talking a little bit more about what job seekers are looking for in 2021 for Kane County. The three things I'm covering today are data affecting potential employees in Kane County, what do job seekers want, and how the pandemic is changing employees' perceptions. Originally, I was going to go a little bit more into the changing generational gap of work ethic and work expectations. I did remove that, but moving forward, when I talk about generations in this and in future meetings, these are just the timetables I have for the different generations so that there's a consistent year to expect the age or birth of people I'm speaking of. Another thing that a lot of people may not be aware of is just our Illinois minimum wage table. When it was passed back, I think it was 2019, they increased the minimum wage at $1 per year up to $15 an hour by January 1st, 2025. So just as things move forward, these are what the wages will be as we move on through time. That's why I don't think we hear as much as the $15 minimum wage discussion in Illinois, because we will be there in about 4 years. I did find a great tool online called the MIT Living Wage Calculator that I wanted to share with the committee. It discusses the living wage shown in an hourly rate that is an individual in a household that must earn to support his or her self and their family. This works under the assumption that it is 2,080, 40 hours a week, so 2,080 hours per year. And then it's based upon individuals, single parent caregivers, and 2 adults working. And then when you look at the table, whenever you see wages, it's per hour per adult. So if it's two adults, you might make sure to double that. It's a great tool to just have, and here's the website again. So just for Kane County alone, for someone who is an adult without children, the living wage, according to this table, is $16.32 an hour. And I'll show how much that breaks down to yearly in the next one. For 2 adults with no children, it's $25.66 an hour, or for both of them, $50 an hour per home. And then it scales up. And then on the next page, this is their typical expense table. It's quite big, and I don't want to go through everything, but these are the assumptions that they used in terms of cost to get to these living wages. If you look at the table in terms of current housing costs and food costs, a lot of those are low end of the assumptions, and the transportation costs are actually on the higher end of the scale when you scale to kids. But it is a good working model, and it creates a good conversation to really what goes into people's asking for the wages that they've asked for. And so I just suggest that everyone on the committee just take a look at this tool, not just for Kane County, but surrounding counties, and compare the living wage that is necessary to thrive in this area. In the Jobs Committee, we've talked previously quite a bit about the expanded unemployment benefits. They were passed in March of 2020. They do end after their ARPA extension for September 5th, 2021. And just so everyone knows, the pandemic unemployment compensation, which is the PUC, which is the general term, and the one most people talk about, was an additional $300 per week. There were additional programs, which were the pandemic emergency unemployment compensation and the extended unemployment benefits. Both of those were 2 different programs that did the same thing, which just allowed different states to expand the length of time which people could be on unemployment during the height of the pandemic. And they used thresholds of nationwide unemployment numbers to gauge how long those would last. We've talked about it in previous meetings, and it's something that we could talk about all day, but the effects on childcare. Just last June, Governor Pritzker announced that there will be a program in Illinois where families below the federal poverty line will now pay only $1 a month for childcare. And also again in July, Governor Pritzker announced hundreds of millions of dollars in funding to improve credentials and education of childcare providers throughout the state. The best local data I could find for childcare is that Illinois lost 9% of its childcare workforce since March of 2020. And to put that into perspective on how it is from workers, on workers, I stole from the other table, the expected cost of childcare per child in Kane County is roughly about $10,000 per child per year. There are so many lists online that I really wanted to boil it down and just talk briefly about what job seekers are looking for now in the post-pandemic era. And when I say comprehensive benefits, I mean comprehensive as in dental, health, childcare, any other benefits that they can find that are offered through businesses to help make their work experience easier. Stability and security, so looking, a lot of unemployed people were affected by the pandemic, want to make sure that they move back into fields that if the situation changes again, that those jobs will be stable and secure. People are still really into company culture and what working there, how that affects its employees. An active web presence was a new one, and that not just social media, but what is the internet presence of a company and how they talk about their ideals, their products. Are they in a way that competes with other modern companies? Company values, it goes with culture, but it just, a lot of companies now have moral statements, value statements, in addition to their mission statements, and those go online. The big thing we're seeing is employee testimonials. There are more and more websites, kind of like Glassdoor, where employees, both current and former, can share their experiences of working with a place to allow potential employees to get that idea of what working there would be like. Job seekers are looking for more understanding of the work-life balance from employers, especially for those who had children at home during the pandemic or those who have to deal with children for childcare, and just how they can balance the schedules of the employee versus the needs of the employer. A positive and inclusive environment is something that's coming up more for the younger generations, and they want to make sure that diversity goals, hiring goals, and everything are transparent as well as enacted effectively. Paid childcare leave is something that not just is being expected of in the future, but now not for just women, but for men as well. You'll see more men asking for paid childcare leave to help and assist with the childcare in those earlier stages. I did discuss the living wage, and the remote work is something I'm going to cover in the next couple of slides, because initially during the pandemic, I think everyone was gung-ho behind supporting remote work at home. But now, a year and a half later, a lot of those have changed, and we have some stories to kind of go with that. I just wanted to share a study from a Harvard Business Review called the Citrix Talent Accelerator Study. It was, they surveyed 2,000 knowledge or tech or science and STEM workers and 500 HR directors at established medium and big businesses with 500 employees or more about what they're expecting now that the pandemic's over as employees from the company that they work for. And it basically boils down to is 88% of the employee survey want flexibility on their hours. 83% predict that the flexible work model will be the new model moving forward, no matter where they live. 76% of the workers polled believe that employees are now more inclined to prioritize lifestyle and family personal interests ahead of their proximity to their work, and they will pursue jobs and locations where they can focus on both, even if it means taking a pay cut, which I thought was interesting. 83% of employees think that workers will be more likely to move out of cities and other urban locations if they can work remotely for a majority of time, creating new work hubs in rural areas. And that one is something that I'm keeping track on more data for.
Go back to that 76.
Yep.
Go back, that's 76% again?
Yeah. So 76% of the workers are looking more now to prioritize what kind of lifestyle they want to live versus the amount of hours or the, you know, it's shifting the focus away from the career and back onto the self.
Okay.
And the interesting is people did agree that a pay cut may be necessary to move to locations that have a lower cost of living because they are working remotely, and they're willing to do that to be able to move to suburban and rural areas. And you know, there's been a lot of conversations about, you know, people moving out of the cities during the pandemic and people who had the means to move out to work remotely in places with lower cost of living. And there's some data that's starting to reflect the opinions of people about that.
Okay.
Interesting was 86% of employees said they would prefer to work for a company that prioritizes outcomes over output. I had to put a little bit of thought into what that meant. And it just meant that employees now are looking more holistically about, are they doing the best that they can, or are they trying to live up to a measurable standard that was put there on them as employees? I think most people would agree with it. It would be easier for them to work that way. I don't necessarily have any comments about the effectiveness of that. But the HR directors who were surveyed, only about 2/3 of them said their company currently opted this way, and only half said it would be productive if employees were trusted to do their jobs without monitoring for their progress. So that's the push-pull that I think is going on with the generational changes of people want to have a little bit less oversight in their work and have outcomes, I think, that are less based upon numbers and more actualized data or what they can produce at their jobs. Employees do want to work with a diverse team. The majority of employers and majority of directors assert that a diverse workforce will be more important as role skills and company requirements change over time. I agree with that, and honest, accessible metrics around your diversity progress and remaining gaps are critical to ensuring that efforts to build a diverse team are measurable, targeted, and impactful. So most everyone can agree that diversity is paramount to building a successful work culture. I think everyone wants it to be very open and clear about what those goals are, how they're being met, and what the metrics are used to measure them. An interesting article that came up just a couple of days ago was how tech employees could lose work from home money because of their proximity to work. And what Google had put out was that they were changing their metrics for pay based upon the proximity to work. Facebook and Twitter are following, saying they're cutting pay for remote areas to move to less expensive areas, so cost of living cuts. Smaller companies actually shifted to an opposite model, which was location agnostic, saying that instead of changing it, they're making the pay irregardless of where you live. And their contention is it cites advantages when it comes to hiring, retention, and diversity. Google's pay structure raises alarm about who feel the impacts most acutely, including families. And I wanted to share this just because we like to use the big companies as models of what's going on in terms of the work world, because what happens there is generally reflected in our smaller and medium-sized businesses. So I'm keeping an eye on this as data comes out about it, but just imagine working at Google and you're making $150,000 a year. And then for the pandemic, you moved about 15 miles away from the city just to have a lower cost of living. Well, according to their structure, that would be anywhere from a 10 to 15% pay cut based upon you moving away from the city. So it's just interesting to see how this is all happening. And as data comes out, I'll continue to share it with the Jobs Committee. These are my sources, which are online, but I know I went through it kind of quick, but I just wanted to leave some time open for some questions. And thank you.
All right. I got a question. When you talk about the outcome versus output, which I think is really great. I just had a conversation the other day with some people discussing that issue. That data comes from the employee side. So is there any data on the employer side that discusses that?
Not that I have currently. The data that I had was from the HR directors who felt that only about half of the companies are currently successfully supporting that model or could in the future. And the reasoning that I read was just that output is a numerical value. It's easy to measure consistently because you can say I produced X, Y, and Z to this degree. Outcomes, that requires more conversation, and it could be, I wouldn't say nebulous, but it'd be a much harder measurement to have, especially given across the variance of employees at different positions.
Okay. Any other questions for Chris? All right, we're gonna move on then to any update on the county's economic development initiative?
Sure. Just had two brief slides. In a red circle, somehow between May and June, our unemployment numbers shot up almost a full percentage point. I don't have an explanation to why that is. But in the next slide, you'll see some other information that it kind of correlates with it. But I haven't had any data come across my way, and I haven't had any response from the Bureau of Labor Statistics of why that would be such a big jump. But we did have almost a full percentage point jump between May and June. So I am monitoring that. And then last month, I predicted that we'd only have about 9 million open jobs recorded for the month of June, and I was completely wrong. It shot up to over 10 million. Again, I don't have an explanation for that. We'll probably be about 3 months out for that data, but we are monitoring because it's an alarming number to say that it's continuing to rise into the summer.
Wow.
And then, Mark, I don't know if you had anything else, but that's it for me.
No, just generally, this is Mark Van Kerkhoff. An update. Last month, I presented the budget that Development Department presented in regards to economic development activities. And we're continuing to look at outside grant sources as grants are being announced at the federal and state level for the American Rescue Plan money, as well as I'll be submitting requests in as part of the county's internal process that Jared Sanchez and his committee is working on. So if anyone has any questions on those specifics, I'd be happy to answer those. But generally, they're in our primary areas of agriculture, overall economic development strategy and development, and tourism with our fabulous Fox Water Trail. So thank you.
Okay, and when you say that is again, when do you think you have those?
We're developing the budgets to submit to the county's ARP committee. Some of those are
By the next meeting? Is
Oh
that-
yeah, by the next meeting.
Okay,
They'll be,
all right, that's what I was.
they'll probably go first to or right to the ARP committee, depending on how
Yeah.
quickly they're
All
working.
right. All right. It's going to be interesting to see how things come out with the child care efforts, because that is a large part of what's happening out in the community. And also still like to see the thoughts on transportation. Right now, passing by the station in Aurora, the number of cars that used to be in the parking lot is tremendously reduced. And the overflow parking lot that's behind there, that's been built by the city of Aurora, doesn't carry as many, nowhere near as the cars that it did before. So I don't know if there's any way to get information on what's happening with transportation. Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none. Any new business?
Copy, please.
Go ahead, Kopi.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. And that is in regards to following up on our the idea of broadband in the rural communities. I understand that the American Rescue Plan has made explicit provisions for broadband, and I believe that it would behoove the county's interest to develop a plan to spend some of those available funds in the broadband, and I'd like to entertain that through our committee, since it pertains to jobs specifically, in that people seeking jobs remotely can have access now to broadband, which is a prerequisite for somebody attaining a job in those areas. So just keep that in mind, please.
Sure will. we are working on a special presentation for next meeting. I don't have all the details yet that Chris and I have talked about. We made contact with someone who's looking to do a apprenticeship program that can start putting us in a direction of unique job opportunities that this committee can present. With that in mind, unanimous on having our reports placed on file. Now, everybody's not present, so this might be hard to do it like this. So just go ahead and do a roll call.
I need a first.
So for a motion and a
Okay.
second.
So moved.
Wallace, in a second.
Molina will second.
Yeah.
Iqbal,
Iqbal, yes.
Gopi,
Kopi, yes.
thank you. Lewis, Molina,
Molina, yes.
Wallace,
Yes.
Davis, Ford,
Yes.
approved.
All right. We have no need for executive session, so motion and a second to adjourn to our next meeting.
So moved.
Iqbal seconds.
All in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. We're adjourned to our next meeting.